Welcome back, guys. This is your friend Shinobi Addict 2.0, and we are back with a new amazing fanfic. Which is what if Naruto left Konoha and united every nation under him? Part 1. And if you enjoy this fanfic, then please press the like button and subscribe to our channel for more fanfic like this. Now let's start the fanfic. My name is Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze. I used to go by the name of Naruto Uzumaki instead until I was told of my heritage. All my life I had believed that I had been abandoned by my parents because of what I hold, so you can imagine my surprise when I learned my father was Minato Namikaze, the Yondaime Hokage, also known as the Konoha no Kuroi Senko, Konoha's Yellow Flash, the very same man who sealed the Kyuubi no problem Yoko in my gut. For a long time I was pissed at my gather for the burden being placed on my life. On some level one feel like he trusted me with the task of keeping the Kyuubi in control, believing I could tame its power, but there are some times where I wish I had never entrusted with the task. My mother was Uzumaki Kushina, Red Death of Konoha, from Uzushiogakure no Sato, village hidden among the whirling tides. They say she was beautiful, a redhead with a tomboyish attitude similar to how I used to be, and she was also a kunoichi of the Whirlpool country which was destroyed at the beginning of the Third Great Shinobi War. My mother was the only known survivor as there was no proof anyone else had survived. The only problem is that she is assumed to be dead, meaning she either abandoned me at the hands of the village or she passed on but went missing. I had learned about my heritage after I brought back Tsunade to be Hokage. Jiraiya had decided it was time that I should know who I really was. I was so happy to find out I actually belonged to people that loved me and didn't abandon me like I had thought all these years. I had then learned I had a special bloodline called the Omni Elemental. This allows me to use all elements as if they were my primary element, and with me being a jutsu lover, I couldn't wait to learn all the possible jutsu out there and even create some along the way. This bloodline was apparently from the Namikaze side of the family. The Uzumaki side was a mystery as my mother was a bit secretive about her past as it was a painful issue to her when speaking to others about it. I am now 17 years of age. 4 years ago I was banished from my home village Konohagakure no Sato, village hidden in the leaves, all because of the foolish council thinking they know what's good for their village. I was banished for the sole reason of not completing a mission I wasn't even the leader of, the mission where I had to bring my ex-teammate, Sasuke Uchiha, back to the village, all because he left in order to gain more power. Of course the council in their infinite wisdom decided that he was too valuable to let to go and sent Shikamaru Nara, Kiba Inuzuka and his partner Akamaru Choji Akamichi and Neji Hyuga. All of us pursued Sasuke through the forest because he had teamed up with the Sound 4. Eventually the group broke as they started to have one-on-one fights with the Sound FR and then their fifth member, Kimimaro. Choji and Neji both ended up near death after defeating their opponents, Jirobo and Kitamaru. Kiba and Akamaru were nearly killed by Sakin and Ukin, but were saved by the timely intervention of Kankuro. This situation was repeated with Shikamaru being saved by Tamari from Tayuya. I then engaged Kimimaro in battle for a while but was not a match for him. Rock Lee saved him in order for me to continue pursuing Sasuke. Gaara, in turn, saved Rock Lee, and both were then saved by Kimimaro's succumbing to disease. When I faced off with Sasuke, the battle ended in Sasuke's favor, but he chose not kill me. In the end, the mission was a failure, as Sasuke successfully joined up with Orochimaru. I was so weak back then I felt ashamed. After that mission I made the decision that I and he were enemies. The next time I saw him, only one of us would walk away. I now have many enemies despite being at the young age of 17, the Akatsuki, who are after me for the power of the Kyuubi for their own uses, Orochimaru, who most likely wants the Kyuubi's power himself, but honestly I just want to kill him for killing the Sandaime Hokage, the only person to ever be nice to be as a kid, and my ex-teammate, Uchiha Sasuke. Not long after being released from the hospital I was called up to the council chambers that resided within the Hokage Tower. I still remember everything, even to this day. Flashback. Hokage Tower. Council Chamber. As Naruto entered the council chamber, he could feel the tension that was in the air, which seemed to suffocate the room. Taking a good look around, he was able to see all those that were present. At the top in the center was Shimura Danzo. He was a manipulative man who would use other people and Saker. Ifice them if it meant getting what he wanted. There were also rumors that he had worked with Orochimaru on occasion, but it was never proven, just like all rumors on the man. The two other elders either side of Danzo were Udatane Kaharu and Mitokado Homura, ex-teammates of Hiruzen Sarutobi, the S. Andime Hokage. Udatane Kaharu holds the belief that the group is more important than any of its individual members. Because of this, she always tries to do what she thinks is the best for Konoha, even if it goes against the Hokages or her opinion. She is also quite demure, but does not let this stop her from voicing her opinion. In fact, despite this, Kaharu is one of the few people able to put the fifth Hokage in her place when she oversteps her authority. Like Homura, she is more militant than the Hokage she served under have been, and sometimes leans more to Danzo's point of view. Homura is somewhat of an authoritarian, but he always has the village's best interests in mind. Like Kaharu, he is more militant than the Hokage he served under have been, and sometimes leans more towards Danzo's point of view. The others in the council were all the clan heads of the Hyuga, Inuzuka, Aburame, Akamichi, Nara, and Yamanaka. Hyuga Hiashi was a strange person. Sometimes he neither hated nor liked Naruto, but once he defeated Neji he started to admire the boy as he defied fate, as one might say. He was however Namikaze Minato's best friend, but because of the laws placed around Naruto he was unable to anything for the bow. Why? Leaving him to the wolves, one might say. Inuzuka Sume had always liked Naruto even before she knew who he was. She had liked him because his personality was more like hers in every sense of the word. The fact that he had a feral look about him didn't do any justice either. She was one of Uzumaki Kushina's closest friend. She had tried to adopt the boy into her clan knowing he would be able to learn their clan techniques as he is more of an animal, similar to all Inuzukas. Aburame Shibi had liked Naruto as he could relate with the boy considering that his clan held bugs within their bodies much like Naruto holding in the Kyuubi. They weren't stupid to relate the two as they were two separate beings. Shibi had actually gained some sense of respect for the Namikaze as he had been able to fight through all the insults, glares, etc. when any lesser man would cave. The Inoshika Cho trio had also always respected and liked the boy as they were probably the smartest clans out there. They could easily tell that the boy was just that, a boy. They had also liked Naruto for the simple fact their children admired him the more he grew up, which actually made them train harder than ever. They were all now sitting in their clan seats along with Tsunade in the Hokage seat. On the other side of the room sat the Jonins and Chunins that were Naruto's friends and senseis as they had been told to come. Danzo, looking as Naruto with narrowed eyes, spoke up. "Do you know the reason for why you've been called?" he asked the confused blonde-haired boy who blinked at him. Not really, I was just told I had to come here." Naruto explained with a raised eyebrow as if asking why he was here. Danzo for a moment looked smug for some reason. "We, of the council, have viewed everything that had happened on the latest mission, and given certain circumstances, we have voted to have you exiled from Konohagakure, indefinitely," he said with conviction, making almost every shinobi snap their heads in his direction in shock. "What?" Tsunade shouted in outrage. "Naruto Uzumaki failed to bring back Sasuke Uchiha and allowed him to go to Otogakure with Orochimaru. For that action he must be banished." Kaharu spoke up while looking at Naruto with hate through her squinted eyes. "He also used his tenant's power while fighting the Uchiha, putting his life in danger along with anyone else who may come in contact with the boy in the future. Naruto Uzumaki is a ticking time bomb ready to explode." Homura explained. "We wanted to execute him. The incident at the Valley of the End was not the only time that demonic chakra has been sensed. It was reported on his first mission out of the village, as well as during the Chunin exams and after them when Sunagakure was invading. We gave him a chance, but enough is enough. However, We've seen how you favor the boy, so decided on exiling him instead. Danzo said, directing his attention to the angered Tsunade. Naruto, however, kept his head lowered. Luckily, all of Naruto's friends already knew of the Kyuubi and didn't see a problem with the blonde-haired boy, so it wasn't so much as a secret anymore. His seal has not been damaged, it most certainly isn't breaking, Tsunade snapped. Have you no faith in the Yondaime's sacrifice? The Yondaime, gifted as he was not infallible. And Jiraiya's been keeping an eye on the boy. He's a seal master in his own right. So you honestly think that he wouldn't notice if anything was wrong with it? Tsunade was absolutely livid. How dare they? Just who do they think they're dealing with? The seal that the Yondaime crafted for the boy was one of his own design. It's one of a kind, and only the Yondaime knew how it worked properly. Jiraiya is not qualified to make decisions in the boy. And you are. Tsunade knew that she had to end this. The mutterings of the council, particularly the civilian half, it wasn't comforting. She opened her mouth to speak, but Koharu cut her off. So you say that the seal isn't breaking? Well then, what excuse has Uzumaki got for using the demonic chakra? If what you're saying is correct, then the fact that he can call up the demon's chakra himself is something that's even more troubling. At least the Uchiha's seal warrants an excuse for his behavior. That little, how dare she? Tsunade was struggling to keep her temper. Before anyone could speak, they heard chuckling. Turning to the owner, Aver saw Naruto with his head down while chuckling, but not a humorous chuckle, but a hollow chuckle. You know, he muttered, getting everyone's attention. I was wondering how long it would take the council to pull this one, treating me as the scapegoat, all because you old bag of bones can't even shit right without help, so what do? Pick the usual punching bag to place all blame on because of your incompetence. He spoke with such coldness that many actually shivered from it while the elders grew outraged. Listen here, boy. Danzo started only for a kunai to go flying past his head, cutting some hair off the side of his head. Looking ahead, he saw Naruto with his arm outstretched and a cold look in his eyes. No, you listen to me. He practically commanded. Everyone else looked at Naruto in shock at the way he was acting. You say I'm dangerous because I have access to the Kyuubi power and I'll use it to practically kill and destroy. If that is the case, then why is this village still standing? He asked rhetorically while looking around. I have every reason to say it and release Kyuubi and reduce the village to nothing, but I don't because I actually have people who see me for me and not some weapon, monster, Abum. I nation that should be destroyed. Everything I have ever done is for their safety. I have put my life on the line protecting everyone who is precious to me, and I'm the one on trial here, being told I am a ticking time bomb. Right now, you have no idea how close you are. He spoke as his flashed red for a second, then a sort of violet before going blue, which startled everyone there. You are a danger to everyone here. It is only a matter of time before your presence brings destruction to Konoha. Koharu spoke through gritted teeth, anger clearly displayed on her face. All of a sudden everything seemed to click in Naruto's mind before a small smile played out on his face. I know the real reason you're all doing this, he said with a smug tone, making the elders and the civilian council FFEN. Your fear for those outside the village is amazing. You're not worried about the people of this village, you're worried about yourselves, worried that I have a group of S-rank missing nin after me for the power of Kyuubi, and you know they will come for me, just like Itachi Uchiha and Kisame Hoshigaki did recently, am I right? He asked with an arched brow. What? Sume asked, confused, not knowing who this group was. Quote, the Akatsuki. Jiraiya spoke up, coming from out of the shadows, having listened to everything and had a scowl on his face. Or a group of S-rank missing nin after the Biju's power for God only knows what, and what Naruto is getting at, is that the elders and civilian council want to banish him to protect themselves. Everyone who had heard were gobsmacked that Naruto was in such danger, and yet the village were throwing him away to save themselves. That is irrelevant as of now. Right now we will place a vote, whether or not Naruto Uzumaki will be banished or not. Danzo spoke up, drawing all attention back to himself. All for. He asked, rang his own hand up along with the advisors and civilian council, which was actually the majority of the council now that clans have become empty in the village. And against. He spoke with a smug tone, already knowing the result is Tsunade, and the clans held their hands up with defeat. D looks, but nevertheless showing Naruto their support. Naruto Uzumaki, you will be out of this village within 24 hours or you will executed. You can't do this, Tsunade. Naruto said, stopping Tsunade in her tracks after using her name instead of Ba-chan. Looking up at him, she saw Naruto, who had a smile on his face despite what's happening. Don't worry, this is the best for everyone and you know it deep down, he said with a sigh, seeing her look down. Turning to Danzo, he got a smirk on his face. Oh, and when you record this down, I want my full name there. Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze, son of Minato Namikaze and Kushina Uzumaki. So when you people find yourself in trouble with your enemies, or if Akatsuki decide to attack anyway, don't you dare ask for my help, because as far as I'm concerned, this village can burn to the ground. He said with crimson eyes, staring at the council before leaving the council chambers, leaving many people stunned at what they had just been told. He's the son of. Sakura spoke, not able to finish the sentence. Yeah, Kakashi answered with a sad sigh at failing his sensei's son. And this village has just banished him, Neji whispered in shock. The elders, civilian and shinobi sides of the council weren't faring much better, but Inoichi spoke what everyone was thinking. Dear God, what have we done? Flashback end. Obviously I wouldn't let the village burn just because of my anger at the elders, but for the first time in my life I just wanted them to feel fear, believing that I wouldn't help them. The only reason I ever would is because of Tsunade and Jiraiya as W.L. as my precious people. After that I had gone home to pack up all of my stuff along with scrolls on my bloodline and heritage. Before I could leave, however, Jiraiya had come to my apartment to give me a scroll from my father that he told me to open when I wanted to get really strong, and Tsunade's came around with a couple scrolls on medical jutsu, knowing that I would need to be able to heal myself despite the Kyuubi healing abilities. After getting a biggest hug I ever thought possible from Tsunade, I had said goodbye to the two senin. I left my apartment, and eventually the village to live my life only Kami knows where. After reading up more about my bloodline, I soon came to the point where it is possible to combine elements to create a sub-element so that I can recreate Mokuden, Hyoten, and many more. With this I just knew it would help me to become extremely strong. In the first few months I eventually came into a life and death situation when all of a sudden I blacked out. When I had woken up I felt stronger than I ever could feel. As I looked around I had noticed the air looked like an explosion rocked the place, until I saw a puddle where I noticed my eyes had turned a grayish-purple iris and sclera with circular ripples in it. After some investigating I learned that the eyes were a bloodline, a dojutsu that was unable to shut off like the Sharingan and Byakugan. I soon learned that people viewed it as nothing but a myth, that the only person to have had the eyes was the Rakudo Sennin, knowing that it made me feel special for the first time in my life. It was also with this dojutsu that I seemed to gain knowledge in my dreams about jutsu only for the Rinnegan, as it was called, and that the reason for my omni-elemental bloodline was because the Namikazes were derived from the Rakudo Sennin, just like the Uchiha and Senju. However, the family tree had been lost for generations. It wasn't until about 5 months later, where I was on the way to Kumogakure to train more in my Raiden element and perhaps even my Rantan element, which I had read up on and learnt that holders of the particular sub-element reside in Kumo as well as 2 fellow Jinchuriki. Of course I gained this information through some spies had recruited. This was also the same time I met my first Kumo shinobi who would become friends with me as well as allies, and Iwagakure shinobi, who would become my enemy, father like son. It was also the day that something amazing happened. Flashback. Outskirts of Kumogakure Forest. Jumping through the trees, Naruto was on his way towards Kumo in order to get his Raiden element mastered, despite the fact that he is already well versed in that element, but it wouldn't hurt to go to the place that holds the most knowledge of the element to learn more. Just as he was about to jump towards another tree, he could hear the sounds of battle not far, and being the person he is, just had to know what was going on, so in that case he jumped towards where the battle was. As he got close, he was able to pick out 4 Kumo shinobi, 3 females, 2 of them blondes while one had red-brownish hair and a male who had white spiky hair. Across from them were 20 Iowa shinobi who had lecherous grins on their faces at seeing the 3 beautiful women, something he didn't like to see, but what he could tell is that the Kumo shinobi were a bit worn out while it was clear a battle had been fought given the damage of the area and dead bodies of Iowa nin. Damn, this is bad, Yugito, can't you use the Nibi's chakra? The one with red-brownish hair spoke to the young woman named Yugito. Yugito, now that he could see her clearly, was a beautiful woman, she purple eyes, which by the way it sounded, was because of her demon, the Nibi no Bakeniko. Well, at least I've found a fellow Jinchuriki at last. He also noted she wore what looked like the traditional Kumo shinobi wear as well as a headband on her forehead. Can't, I'm too exhausted to be access her chakra right now, Karui. She replied to the now named Karui. Karui was also a beautiful woman in a tomboyish sort of way. She was also dark-skinned while wearing a standard kunoichi Kumo shinobi attire with her headband in the form of a bandana. She also had a sword strapped to her back. She had a long mane of red hair with brown underneath flowing down her back, and she had some of the most beautiful topaz eyes. This is very bad. I knew I should have been nicer to the Raikage, but no, I had to screw up and now he's sent us to our deaths. I honestly didn't think he would be that upset that I hadn't eaten my cereal. The only male spoke who was crouched down low, also wearing standard Kumo attire with his headband tied around his forehead. He had short spiky white hair with black eyes and sucking on a lollipop. He, like Karui, also wore a sword strapped to his back. Shut up, Omoi. He didn't send us to our deaths, right, Samui? Karui asked the blonde woman uncertainty, who blonde short-haired woman with a massive chest stood lazily with on hand on her back as if leaning on it. She also wore similar clothing to Karui with a mesh shirt and a sword in her hand. Right, she said shortly. One of the Iowa nin started walking forward. Why don't you ladies just come peacefully, and we'll show you our appreciation? He said with a leer while his companions laughed harshly, making the woman feel a trickle of fear. You wish, Yugito said with a hiss. Oh, and who's gonna stop us from talkin', our prize? He said as his friends started moving towards the girls and Omoi. Naruto, deciding enough was enough, took action. Jumping high up, he started swirling chakra in his right hand before diving down at the Iowa nin. Rasengan. Coming down fast, he smashed the Rasengan down on an Iowa nin while catching a couple more in the blast radius. Standing up from his crouched position, Naruto looked down to see the dead body of the shinobi and kicked him away while looking around him to see he had been circled by the shinobi, while the Kumo shinobi stood off to the side in shock at seeing what looked like a mini Yondaime Hokage. Who the hell are you? A gruff Iowa nin demanded. Wait a minute, another spoke almost hesitantly. I know you, you're Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze, aren't you, the son of the Yondaime Hokage? You were banished from Konoha all because you held the Kyuubi, huh? This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. We can finally have our revenge, while taking the Kyuubi for ourselves. He spoke almost in glee while everyone stood stock still at the information. Kumo shinobi. The Kumo nin were in no better shape as their jaws were hanging open at the information. Namikaze, Omoi mumbled. Son of the Yondaime Hokage, Samui almost spluttered out. Kyuubi. Yugito asked herself in shock. That's right, kitten. I could feel his presence anywhere, there's no doubt about it, and he's the container of the Kyuubi. The Nibi spoke in her mind. Why would Konoha banish their Jinchuriki? Fear, kitten. Fear make people do a lot of stupid stuff, but if I'm right from what I can feel, banishi. This young man was their biggest mistake ever. Why? I haven't felt power like him since the Rakudo Sennin existed. Unaware of Yugito's internal conversation, Karui had only one word that summed everything up. Whoa. With Naruto. Naruto narrowed his rippled eyes at the Iwa Nin while gathering chakra around him ready for anything. Yes, but the question is, how the hell do you know that? The Iwa Nin just chuckled. Information about you is being passed around pretty easily. It's as if someone's out to get ya kid. Don't blame them. Having the Kyuubi, being the son of one the strongest shinobi, and then there are your eyes, the Rinnegan, seems like someone knows more about you than you think. Quote, Naruto's eyes suddenly turned icy cold. On his short journey he has had to kill many bandits and shinobi alike. At first he hated it but eventually got used to it, understanding that he had no choice. This was his life now, and either way, he would have to kill eventually. Over time he had learned to go into a sort of zone, where he would be a monster in battle. All of a sudden all the Iwa Nin pulled out kunai and shuriken, intending on turning him into a pin cousin, much to the Kumo Nin's horror. All at once every single weapon was thrown at Naruto, who simply closed his eyes, rang his arms up either side of him. His eyes snapped open as he called out, Shinra Tensei. To everyone's shock, an incredible force exploded from out of Naruto, blowing all weapons away at a much faster speed while eating a small crater underneath him. Don't underestimate me, or you'll pay for it, he exclaimed as he flipped through hand seals before calling out, Shoten. Shuriken Ranbu. Lights started to shimmer around Naruto as shurikens started to form out of crystals before spinning around him like a tornado. Thrusting his right arm out in front of him, he sent his shuriken soaring for the 5 Iwa Nin who were frozen in the spot, causing them to be shredded from the crystal shurikens that tore through the skin with such force that they slammed them into the surrounding trees. Sensing movement from his right, he spun around while flipping a kunai out of his sleeve, blocking a kunai in the hands of one of the nin. Pushing against it, he caused the nin to stumble back before he used his free hand to knock his opponent's kunai out of hand before thrusting his own into his heart and kicking the body away with his right foot and catching the kunai that he knocked away. Spinning around, he threw his 2 kunai at 2 Iwa Nin, who came at him, hitting them in the foreheads, effectively killing them. 8 down. Man, these guys are weak. If I didn't know any better, I'd say they were high genin, low chunin. Hearing a noise that sounded like a swoosh, he spun around only to come face to face with the end of a katana when all of a sudden he seemed to black out. Mindscape. Opening up his eyes, he soon realized he wasn't in the same forest anymore. As he looked around, he could only see what looked like a tropical forest. Only when he looked up, all he could see was red, as if the sky was on fire, which was strange since he couldn't feel any heat whatsoever. I was wondering when you would come. A voice spoke up which sounded almost regal. Turning around, he came upon the sight of what looked like a man dressed in a samurai outfit. The only strange thing is that the outfit was made out of fire, while bits of it were metal, such as the kneecaps, elbow pad, shoulder pads, feet and gloves. The outfit gave off a powerful feel, while also feeling like he should welcome it with open arms, like it's a part of him. Who are you? You're Zanpakuto. The figure spoke simply, as if no explanations were needed. Zanpakuto. What's that? Naruto confused. The figure chuckled behind its helmet. A Zanpakuto is a manifestation of a person's soul. It is extremely rare for a human to ever obtain a Zanpakuto, but that is irrelevant right now, seeing as you have one. Anyway, Zanpakutos are unique to their owner, as the swords are both reflections of their owner's soul and power, and sentient beings unto themselves, hence me. The physical form of a Zanpakuto is a sword. This sword will be a representation of your soul and will be formed to be one with you in a way. So, you're saying that you are a sword? And I'm the only one who can use you? He asked. Yes, there are a few things first, however. Every Zanpakuto has its own unique name. A Zanpakuto can determine whether or not its wielder is worthy of its power, and also each Zanpakuto have their own true form. This isn't mine at the moment. You could say this is my first form in a way. Okay, I understand more. So you say each has its own name. What's yours? Naruto asked with a raised brow. Well, normally people don't hear their Zanpakuto's name straight away, but I got a feeling you aren't like the others. Very well, my name is Ryujin Jaka. As soon as the name was spoken, Naruto could literally feel the power that came just from the name. Ryujin Jaka huh, I like it. Naruto spoke with a grin. Ryujin Jack also chuckled. All Zanpakuto are different as they each have their own ability. Mine is the ability to control all fire, big or small. There are also different levels when it comes to Zanpakuto, which are sealed. This is the base form of the Zanpakuto, like so, opening his hand, fire swirled around it before settling into his palm and stretching out and eventually forming a sword. The sword was one of the most amazing things he had ever seen. It must have been at least 5 feet long, standard katana with a dark purple handle and a circular hand guard with what looked like a phoenix engraved around the edge. The scabbard was a royal purple with a red tassel that hung off the top just underneath the guard. This is the sealed form. The next form is called Shikai, initial release, the second form available to a Zanpakuto. To activate it, the wielder needs to learn the name of their Zanpakuto. This is not as easy as simply picking a name, as the living spirit of the Zanpakuto already has its own name. Therefore, the wielder must be able to communicate and harmonize with their Zanpakuto effectively, which requires being able to speak to the spirit within its world, very much like we are now. However, it is the third form, Bankai, that is most difficult to acquire. One must be able to materialize and subjugate their Zanpakuto spirit. Materialization means the opposite of getting dragged into the Zanpakuto's inner world. Instead, the wielder needs to summon the Zanpakuto's spirit into the physical world. It usually takes 10 years or more to achieve, plus the experience needed to master it. By achieving this, the power can increase tenfold. However, even with the usual time, I have faith in your ability. How come I have this power though? Naruto asked with a raised brow. Ah, that is a good question, my boy. Well, first off, what do you know about the Shinigami? Ryujin Jaka inquired. Just that it was the one to put Kyuubi inside of me. Correct. Ryujin Jaka said with a nod. But that's not all. The Shinigami goes around the world searching for pure souls, like you, to do his work for him in a way by giving them powers. A Zanpakuto, for instance, is a tool of the Shinigami. So you're saying I'm part Shinigami? Naruto asked in shock. In way, yes I am, but more of the fact you have been touched by it and given a gift. Ryujin Jaka explained. Well then, I guess I should put on my resume, Shinobi Jinchuriki, Shinigami under job huh? Naruto said with a chuckle. Haha, you must be careful though, with having the Kyuubi within you, it may corrupt the Shinigami powers. But be warned also that there will be people out there with Zanpakutos, they may not all be good either. Naruto's mouth was practically through the floor with the information provided and couldn't help but feel giddy. Awesome, so how do I use you, or work with you? Is that's the right way? I'm not used to this sort of thing. Ryujin Jaka just laughed. It's okay, my boy, in time you will learn as we grow together, but for now I will give you the knowledge you will need to use me. Simply touch the Zanpakuto within my hand, and all information needed will be given. He said, holding out his hand. Naruto without hesitation grasped the scabbard part when a rush of feelings flew into him, and power of the likes he had never felt before enveloped him in its pure energy while in form. Ashin flew to his brain. Outside world. Naruto suddenly felt like he had awoken from a dream until the world came into focus just as a katana was about to strike his head, bringing his arm to block the hit. He didn't expect to find a katana in his hand. Bringing it up quickly, he blocked his opponent's katana and pushed him off, sending him back. Looking down at the blade, everything that had happened moments earlier suddenly came back to him, causing a grin to form on his face. Putting the sword up in front of him so it was horizontal, he grasped the scabbard with his left arm tightly as he started pulling on the handle. All around him the temperature started to go up, causing everyone to back away from him cautiously as the grass beneath his feet started to catch fire while a red haze covered his body. Kumo team. As the Kyuubi? Karui asked Yugito. No, this is something else. She replied while shaking her head. Where the hell did that sword come from? Omoi asked, not expecting an answer. Samui eyed Naruto with calculative eyes. Who is this boy? Everything seems like some fairy tale, As soon as this over, I want answers. With Naruto. Naruto's eyes snapped open as his Rinnegan seemed to glow, pulling out the sword all the way he called out. Bansho Isai Kaijin Tenace, Ryujin Jaka. What came next was something no one would ever forgot. Fire engulfed the katana with such unnatural heat that the surroundings started to catch fire just from the intensity. The fire from around the katana grew and enveloped Naruto himself, who seemed to be in a state of peacefulness as the fire shot up into the sky, turning the once blue sky red. And just like that, all the fire that surrounded Naruto vanished, only enveloped the katana, handle included, as well as Naruto's right arm. Placing the scabbard in his belt, he brought Ryujin Jaka in front of him and swung ahead, causing a wave of intense heat to spew forth, enveloping Ten Iwa Nin. Unfortunately, they didn't have time to scream as the heat turned them to dust, incinerating them. Turning around, he jabbed forward, stabbing an Iwa Nin trying to sneak up on him. Fire exploded from the katana, wrapping around the enemy as his screams pierced the air before he was burnt to a crisp, before copying the same thing with the last remaining nin. Sighing in relief, Naruto placed the katana back in its scabbard, which dispelled the flames before he turned to see 4 stunned Kumo nin. I don't know about you, but I could really do with getting to Kumo right about now. Quote. Flashback end. After that, they took me to the Raikage, where explained everything that had happened to me to him ever since I was banished, as well as the Zanpakuto. I was still in shock that I was part Shinigami, but couldn't wait until I found others like me. I soon learned a lot of techniques from my Zanpakuto, which are called Hado, which are the destructive spells, my favorite, and Bakudo, the more defensive spells, very helpful. They were classed as Kido, which is Demon Way. After the Raikage found out who I was, he decided that he would help train me, which made the 4 Kumo shinobi to look on in shock, which I had seen too many times lately. When I asked why, he simply told me that when I became a legend, that to mention he had trained me, which I had to admit, wasn't a bad deal. So from that day on, I learned from the Raikage and sometimes his brother, who called himself Killer Bee, the Hachibi no Kyogyu Jinchuriki. They taught me a lot about Raiden, to the point where I could use it from any part of my body like it was nothing. I also learned some Ranten, not a lot, but enough to get me by. I stayed there for 6 months, integrating with their culture and getting to know everybody. I started seeing the Raikage and Killer Bee as 2 crazy older brothers. While I became closer to Yugito, Samui and Karui, I knew they were trying for my affection, but at the time I was unable to give it to them. Killer Bee had told me about an island where he learned to control the Hachibi's chakra and offered to take me. Despite how much I felt I needed to, I knew I couldn't at the time, so I told him I would when I was ready, seeing as I felt I was nowhere near strong enough yet. When I eventually had to leave, I said goodbye to everyone, except for the 3 girls. Nope, but I gave them each one hell of a kiss that they would remember for a while. My next destination was Kurigakure to learn about Suiten Jutsu, seeing as that is where they specialize in that element. While there, I had met Mei Terumi, the yet commanding Mizukage, and had found she was quite flirtatious with me, something I didn't mind considering her beauty. However, despite how much I wanted to, I had told her nothing could happen. Yet, while she was disappointed, she understood clearly. That didn't stop her from leaving me with something to remember. Soon after that, I ended up in Sunagakure, where I followed up on futon manipulations, since I knew all Maste RS of the elements hailed from the great village. I progressed well in the art thanks to Gaara and Tamari, who had felt like they owed the blonde young man for saving Gaara from the darkness. At some point during the 3rd year of my banishment, I finally opened the scroll Jiraiya had given me before I left, and what do I find within it? The entire Ika Ika Collector's Edition, as well as something else my father left behind, Hiraishin no Jutsu, the very thing that made my father who he was now all mine. I also started learning from Tsunade's medical scrolls and had to admit they helped. I soon found my partner in crime, as well as one of my lovers. Instead of being in a relationship, we were what you could say, friends with benefits, something we both were okay with considering our life at that moment. This person was the beautiful Kagura Ankai. Her emerald eyes and crimson hair always seemed to sway in mischief. She wore a black battle kimono that was slightly altered. It was altered in a way that it was very revealing. Yet to underestimate her would be a great disadvantage. She was carrying in her hand a wicked-looking demon scythe, Beni Akadokiami, Crimson Moonless Dawn. The scythe had a bone-like handle in black up to 5 feet. With a flat metal base for it to stand, at the top of the scythe where the blade is connected there is what looks like an emblem of a silver skull with ruby-red eyes. Whereas the curved blade that is connected is black with red along the edges making it looks like blood. The scythe to my shock was actually a Zanpakuto, the first other person have met who was part Shinigami. Apparently her Zanpakuto had explained it all to her. It seemed for some reason it was always in its Shikai form. Ryujin Jaka had told me that it was either because it was too powerful or she didn't have enough control, or maybe both. The advantage was that it never got in the way, unlike mine, which would make me walk around with a sword on fire 24/7. When she uses her Zanpakuto, it tends to increase her battle lust, which doesn't concern Kagura at all since she loves battle. With Beni Akadokiami, Kagura can unleash some destructive techniques that could possibly rival me. Her techniques though tend to relate with the moon. Her expertise with her Zanpakuto had earned her the name Shujuhi Kiho, Scarlet Witch, because of her techniques and her crazy lust for battle. I had met her close to Kurigakure where she thought I was a bounty hunter. Long story short, we fought, I won, she joined me, and we eventually had hot steamy. All jokes aside, she is the only person to come close to killing me aside from the Raikage. On the 4th year of my banishment I had learnt that Gaara had been kidnapped by Akatsuki but eventually rescued and brought back to life thanks to Konoha. I couldn't believe I didn't even know he had been kidnapped until it was way too late. I felt like the worst friend. What I did know was that if Konoha hadn't been able to save him then Akatsuki would be wiped off the map. It was also during the 4th year that I was traveling past a Megakure when I was confronted by an Akatsuki member. However, this one was different, and the fact that she was female was a big S. Tartar, as everyone I had met or known about were male. Her name was Konan. She was a truly beautiful woman who held up a cold expression to hide her true feelings, but against someone who had led a harsh life I could easily see it through her eyes, the pain, loss, hurt and regret. We had fought obviously. I kept my eyes hidden so that no Akatsuki member would know about them should they know of them, which would make them my trump card so to speak. I eventually beat her and spared her. Flashback. Konan and Naruto stood away from each other both bloody and battered. Naruto's clothes were torn and he had cuts all over the place thanks to Konan's paper attacks, which honestly were a bitch. Konan wasn't much better, she was burnt, soggy and frazzled. Some of her Akatsuki cloak had been burned off, almost revealing. It was at that point that Konan dropped to her knees admitting defeat, admitting being weak to beat her opponent. Naruto, seeing he won, turned away and started walking, confusing Konan. "Why aren't you going to kill me?" she asked, confused. Naruto looked back at her and had trouble keeping the blush down at how beautiful she seemed as the sunlight broke through the clouds. "I see no reason to kill you," he said as she looked at him in disbelief. "But I'm your enemy," she exclaimed, showing emotion for the first time in a while. "You know what pain really is, I can see it in your eyes," he said as if it was the simplest thing. "What would you know of pain?" she asked with an edge to her voice. Naruto walked over to her and knelt by her. "Because I am the Kyuubi Jinchuriki," he said, shocking her. She didn't know he was a Jinchuriki, just that he was trespassing in aim and he had to be dealt with. We Jinchuriki are the epitome of pain, agony, loneliness. We feel it all, and what's worse is we're treated like nothing but scum or being made into tools for other people's own selfish needs, and your leader is nothing more than one of those pathetic delusional fools," he said in a harsh tone that surprised her. "You don't anything about him," she said sharply, trying to defend the man who had been with her always. "Really, you mean I don't know who your oh so great leader is, Nagato, or is it Yahiko?" he asked nonchalant, causing Konan's eyes to widen. "How do you know who he is?" she questioned harshly. Naruto smirked, he was getting to her. "I have my ways. I heard all about you, Nagato and Yahiko, At first when I saw your blue hair I thought nothing of it, but when you used paper for jutsu it confirmed my suspicions. You are alive, unlike what the rumors say. Conan's brain was racing. She didn't think that this meeting would turn out like this. She finds out he's a Jinchuriki, then he know about the three of them, and then Nagato. Now she finds out he is Jiraiya sensei's pupil as well. Maybe, just maybe he can save me. What do you want to do with your life? He asked, startling her from her thoughts. What do you mean? She asked, confused. I mean, do you want to live your life with a man who only sees people as tools to help with his grander plans, or do you want to be Free? Naruto asked, causing her to look down. I don't know anymore. She said as she broke down in front of Naruto, crying for everything she had lost before, how her whole life had been a waste of time serving her childhood friend who would use her as long as it reached his goals. Naruto, seeing a broken down woman, hugged her, bringing his arms around her midsection while she on reflex put her arms around the man's neck and cried into his shoulder. You can leave with me, he suggested, startling her, not expecting that. I can't. He would find me and kill me. It would be too dangerous, she said, as much as she wanted to go with the man that had made her see reality. Naruto shook his head and lowered the glasses he wore to cover his eyes, revealing his own Rinnegan, which made her wide-eyed. I wouldn't let him, I promise, he said with a grin which caused a tint of pink to appear on her pale skin. How do you have those eyes? She asked, confused, as she thought no one else would get them. Naruto sighed and massaged his temple. Honestly, no idea. 1 minute I was near death and woke up in an empty battlefield. With these eyes I will protect anyone precious to me, and if you come with me that means you too, he admitted, as he wanted her to come with him to live a more peaceful life than as a tool. Conan was stuck. She could leave Akatsuki and live the life she had always wanted, or she can stay and be a tool to be used and thrown away at a later date. Conan, however, was too afraid. I can't, she said solemnly, which Naruto nodded his head at. I understand, he said as he stood up and started to walk away, which incidentally caused Conan to panic, realizing she may lose her chance at happiness. Wait, she shouted as she ran up to him and hugged him from behind. What if I be your spy? I could tell you everything that is going on and what's what, and when the time is right I can go with you, she pleaded. She did not want to lose this chance. Naruto pondered that thought but shook his head, crushing her hopes. It's too dangerous for that. If he suspects you of doing anything against you he would kill you, he said, starting to walk forward, but she kept a grip on him. Conan, if you do this you will be putting your life on the line. You would never be safe. I don't care. I've been in these types of situations before. In a way I want to save him, but I know that won't be possible. You're the only one to ever be nice to me like this and see through my exterior. You're the only one to take notice of how I feel. Please give me this chance. Let me prove I can do this for you. I know you can't easily trust me for this, but if I help you take him down, I can free aim as well. I can become the leader and make an alliance with whatever village you will be with. She never wanted something so much before, and given this opportunity she had to make it work somehow. In some strange way she felt an attraction to Naruto, as he reminded her of Yahiko, sort of, someone who would go out of their way to help people no matter who they were. Naruto seemed to think it over. While she would be valuable at getting information about Akatsuki, he didn't want to put her in that position that can be so dangerous. Fine, he said, turning around and saw she had a small smile on her face. But you have to be careful. I will come back for you eventually, one way or the other, he informed his new spy, getting an affirmative nod. With that she told him everything, how the three orphans were betrayed by Hanzo, as him and Danzo struck a deal to kill the three, where only Yahiko died, causing Nagato to turn on his path to peace, which was in the wrong direction as he thought so. She also told him how Nagato had taken up to using 6 bodies besides him to use the Rinnegan abilities separately. Basically she told him everything. End flashback. Ever since that day we had met up on occasion where we would share information about many things. It was one of these times we fell for each other. At one of the meetings we ended up in a makeout session on a field crowded by trees. I don't know how it happened, but I didn't complain. We started to open up a lot more as well. She told me everything about herself along with me doing the same. We eventually became lovers. At first I wasn't so sure about it, but after talking about how I needed to reform my clans as I was the last one, we decided to take the next step. It wasn't long after that I had finally learned the Hiraishin. Once I did, however, I met up with everyone important to me that I met up and gave them a special 3 Pro NGED kunai in case they ever got in trouble, which brings us to the present, where I felt a pull on my mind indicating a kunai had been used. Normal Pav. Turning to Kagura, he said, I've got to go. Hiraishin pull, someone must be in danger. When you can feel my chakra, follow it as fast as possible. He said before giving her a full-blown kiss, which she gladly returned. I'll be there, she said with a flirtatious smile. A second later he was gone. Hai no Kuni, the land of fire. Border. Yugito ni had never been in such trouble before. All she was supposed to do was be on a mission to an outpost within a town to drop off a package, and that was that. Now though, she was thinking something else was going on. And that something was Akatsuki. In front of the blonde-haired woman were the immortal zombie brothers Kakuzu and Hidan, and she was in major trouble of actually losing. Well, that was until teams from Konoha had appeared. Apparently they were after the same Akatsuki members. From she had heard the 2 Akatsuki had killed someone called Asuma, one of the team's senseis. Yugito had introduced herself as the Nibi no Bakeniko Jinchuriki, which made sense to them with seeing her fighting these 2. And it was then they started fighting. Even she knew that was foolish. From her information on them, the teams sent were formed out of Shikamaru Nara, Ino Yamanaka, and Choji Akamichi with Kakashi Hatake as the leader. The second team was formed out of Sakura Haruno, someone led Yamato, Kurenai Yuhi, and someone called Sai. However, neither team was getting far. They had seriously underestimated their opponents as they didn't realize just how powerful this Kakuzu was. They had found out he had 5 hearts, which was truly something they didn't expect, along with the fact he could use all the elements from some masked creatures. Their other opponent Hidan was the hardest as he was invincible literally. However, Shikamaru had taken somewhere else to do battle as he felt it had to be him. When Yamato, Kurenai, Sakura and Sai had gotten there, they had sent Sai and Sakura off to help with Shikamaru, as Sakura's medical ninjutsu and Sai's aerial jutsu could be very helpful. Up to now they had killed Kakuzu twice, meaning he had the hearts left. Kakashi had killed one using Reikiri and the other one was killed by Hidan, who had been tricked by Shikamaru and ended up using Kakuzu's blood in his ritual sacrifice, thinking it was Shikamaru's. Kakuzu's remaining 2 masks had merged with Kakuzu's back. These masks were blue for Futon and red for Kaden, a bad combination. Kakashi and his team along with Kurenai and Yamato were exhausted, and they knew if some miracle didn't happen they may never make it out in one piece. We need a miracle, muttered Kurenai as she surveyed the area and seen it looked like a great war had happened with all the craters and trees that had been reduced to stumps now. I know, but we have to everything in our power to stop this guy. Kakashi replied as he too was looking around, seeing if there was anything they could use. I can see why this guy is part of the Akatsuki, said Yamato as he had run out of chakra to use any of his Mokuden jutsus that may make a difference. Ino and Choji were practically exhausted and couldn't do any more jutsu. Ino's were ineffective as she needed the opponent to stay still, and Choji couldn't get close enough without a jutsu shoved in his face. Kakuzu looked at the in amusement, knowing he was going to enjoy taking Kakashi's heart for his own and maybe Mokuden user or the Genjutsu mistress. Yugito, who had been watching by the side the entire time, still exhausted, realized it was now or never. I think I got just what you need, she said, gaining their attention as she pulled out an Hiraishin kunai. I hope he doesn't mind seeing these guys so soon. As soon as Kakashi saw the kunai, his mind almost blew, not understanding